It's always so weird to start. I feel weird in my body. Hello to the internet. My name's Greg Montgomery, and we're here to talk about who even am I. So today is another segment of Work That Vocabulary, and I actually had a request from my sister, but still a request, to talk about a type of vocabulary thing, sort of thing. So I'm going to work that in this way, and it's about emotional validation. So last week I talked about emotional intelligence, which is all about like looking inwards and exploring what's going on inside your body. The next step is sort of validating those emotions. So we're gonna sort of break that down this week. So emotional validation would be defined basically as the understanding and acceptance of someone else's emotional experience. And I'll kind of go into sort of separating that between self-validation and validation from others, because it's always really beneficial to express a situation and emotional experience to another person and have them validate it back to you. That whole experience is connection, basically. And we'll also talk a little bit about invalidation, which is kind of a big problem that can happen in that transaction, and also self-invalidation when you're invalidating your own emotional experience. So part of the discomfort of learning to look inwards and start understanding what's going on with you emotionally is the fact that you're going to come across some things that are not so good or positive or happy, and that can come with the desire to sort of push those things down. I've talked about that a lot, the repressing. And if you start doing that, you're going to be invalidating your emotional experience by saying, I shouldn't feel this way about this thing. And when you start doing that, what can often start to happen is basically taking that emotional experience that you're denying yourself, and you are starting to project it onto other people. So you'll start looking at other people and basically expecting that they're going through what you're trying to deny yourself from, sort of like blaming them for that emotional experience. Let's try and think of a good example. So I'll go for probably the easiest one, since it's represented a lot in media and like movies and stuff. Internalized homophobia. Basically think of like middle school situation, kid who's bullying another kid for being gay when he is actually himself gay, and trying to not deal with those feelings. He's projecting them onto another person, blaming him for those feelings and bullying him, and trying to like stomp it out of another person. So that would be like what would happen when you repress something that's going on inside of you and then end up projecting it onto another person, and acting on sort of like those negative feelings that happen. That's a situation, one way that can express itself. So that's kind of like part of the danger of self-invalidation. And I mean, it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be things that aren't quite so dire or offensive. But in any case, it's just really important to try and stop that from happening, so that you have like a healthy, balanced emotional state inside of your body to move forward and live your life. So if we're talking about receiving validation from other people, so if we're expressing an emotional experience to them, we want to see them being open to the experience, being present and listening. We want them to respond in kind, that they understand what we're going through, to normalize the experience, help us understand that we're not the only person who has experienced that specific event. And then we want them, if possible, to express a way that they've kind of experienced something that's sort of similar. And that kind of completes that circle of validating that what we're going through is real and matters. So the issue that can sort of arise that when you're reaching out for this experience, when you're trying to express something to somebody and have them listen to it and kind of mirror back what you're feeling, if you're not getting a response that's sort of, I guess, satisfactory, that does feel validating for your emotional experience, It can be really confusing, especially if you don't quite know that that's what you're looking for from that person. If they start to invalidate the experience by judging it, or by trying to tell you that it's not that big of a deal, or trying to fix the problem, or trying to just like push it away, you know, like have some ice cream, you're just sad, it's fine. When you're looking for some validation and you receive that type of response, it can really make you feel disconnected and like you don't want to engage with that person in that moment, because you know the experience that you're looking for, that you needed in order to kind of feel whole with that experience, can feel just very far away, like they're telling you shouldn't be asking for that type of thing, which is okay. Sometimes people are in the right space. Sometimes people just don't, again, like I talked before, have the emotional vocabulary to walk through that moment with you. You shouldn't feel guilty or bad about not being able to engage with that person in that way, but you should move towards someone else who would be better suited to help you through that, or trying to rely on yourself for that validation can be difficult at times. You know, sometimes we need other people to help us move through things, but just don't feel bad if you don't have, like, that person can't really help you through that thing. Not everybody has been through that type of situation before to be able to help you with it. A problem that can happen if you do try to continue connecting with that person to receive that validation is you'll find yourself wanting to repeat over and over, looking for the response that feels satisfactory, and that can become confusing for both parties involved. But I've noticed that in myself when I'm trying to connect with somebody on something and they don't really know how to be there for me, I'll find myself just like continuously repeating the story, just with like slightly different verbiage to try and elicit the specific response that I need in order to feel like, okay, what I'm saying is real. So that can happen, and if you find yourself in that loop, that's probably what's going on, is that you emotionally know what you need. You know, you're asking for validation for them to be like, oh my god, I hear you, and you're not receiving it, and so you're going to continue seeking out that, and it's just sort of better to recognize that that person's not in the right space to help you, and like I said before, move towards maybe trying to find someone who's more available or equipped to help you. I do want to go a little bit into talking about the mirroring, just sort of as a tool if you know you're on the other side of this and you're trying to help someone by listening and validating their experience. Mirroring is basically when it's broken down to a lot of things. We mirror people and their mannerisms, so like their hand gestures, the vocal cadence, things like that. It's a way that we show someone, hey, I'm relating with you. It kind of happens naturally with people that we like. We just sort of start picking up on all of these mannerisms and using them in order to communicate with them, because nonverbal communication is like a totally different type of language. So we use that to show that person, hey, I see you and I like you and I want to be like you a little bit. And so when we're listening to somebody and we're listening to their experience, we can use those things to help make them feel more comfortable. The mirroring that I'm talking about that you want to be conscious of is mirroring their emotional experience. So someone says, man, I had a really hard day today. I got in a fight with my boss and I'm really afraid that I'm going to lose my job. You mirror that by saying like, wow, that sounds really difficult. I'm sure that's very stressful for you. So it's saying, I bet there's an emotional fallout from this experience that you're talking about, and I want to verbally hit that back to you, just like pass it back in a sense of I'm listening and I understand. So that helps them feel like I do feel that way about the situation, and I'm glad that someone else can see why I would feel that way about the situation, and it helps them move through that a little bit. So that's just a tool you can use when you're listening to that situation to help validate that person's experience. So probably the best tool in your little emotional handy dandy toolbox, I don't know, that you can exercise and build up to avoid the looping of your emotional experience, where you're really trying to get someone to mirror back to you what you're feeling, but you're having difficulty doing that, is to learn to self-validate. That's not an easy experience, or the thing to learn, I guess. But learning how to evaluate your own emotions and understand them and accept them and normalize them, and just, fully completing that validating experience for yourself is important in, just growing and learning how to be self-efficient. But it can stop you from moving into that loop. I would never say that it's necessary. I think that connecting with other people and having them be there for you is a wonderful thing. But you also don't want to not be able to move through something just because you can't find someone who knows how to empathize with that situation. And I also find that it's a lot easier to connect with other people when you already have some sort of understanding of your emotional experience, rather than going into it completely raw and trying to explore it out loud with another person. It can be a very taxing experience for both parties involved. Basically, it's just better to do a little bit of emotional investigation beforehand, so that you can select a friend or a loved one who is best equipped to help you with that situation. And even if you do learn to self-validate very well, it's always a good idea to then share that experience after you've moved through it with someone else, just to help build connection and community, and show other people yourself. Just give them an understanding of what's going on inside of you. So yeah, learning to self-validate and then ask for validation from others is mucho bueno, mucho bueno, mucho bueno. Yeah, so that is my working that vocabulary on emotional validation. As always, take care of yourself.